Look, let's take you through the papers at 8:37. We're joined by Benjamin Butterworth from The Eye and the journalist Ella Wheeler. Morning to you both. And we'll start, Benjamin, with you. We're looking at the Mail, I think. We're looking at who hasn't been invited to the funeral, and Russia, Syria, Afghanistan, their representatives not been. But the Chinese have.
They have. So Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, the leader, was invited. It's expected that he won't attend the funeral. He's only left China once in the last 2.5 years, and that's right now. He's in Uzbekistan in Central Asia. However, it is expected that he'll send his right-hand man. Now, this has caused a huge controversy because the ambassador from China to the UK is barred from Westminster because of the concerns over so many things, but particularly the genocide that's going on in China.
With the Uyghurs?
Yeah, that's right. And so MPs...
So why would the Chinese government be allowed to send somebody else?
Well, that's why it's caused controversy.
Yeah.
So the former Tory leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, has written to Lindsay Hoyle, the Commons Speaker, to say that it's inappropriate, it's wrong, that we're being weak on China by inviting them. Now, you know, I think the fact that they are committing a genocide at the time at which they will send one of their most important men to this country to the funeral is a serious concern, because we wouldn't do that for Russia. We haven't invited Putin, and he's rather unhappy about it, and that's because he is murdering innocent Ukrainian people. Well, what is the difference for those Uyghur Muslims in China, you might ask?
But what you have to bear in mind, I think, is that, I take you back to an episode of Yes Minister from donkey's years ago, is that big events like this, and funerals in particular, are actually huge diplomatic events away from all the invited guests and the dignitaries. It is a diplomatic occasion, isn't it? And we want to keep China on board, don't we? They're a concern moving forward. As uncomfortable as it may be, the Queen met many people in her lifetime that made her uncomfortable, but she had a duty to meet them and to shake their hand. Isn't that what we're doing with China? We're saying we might not be very comfortable about this. We're trying to bring you into the fold, make you part of this, have a conversation while they're here, no doubt, rather than exclusion, which just causes more problems.
I mean, I think the people that are angry at it have a very valid point, and it would be wrong to seem like we make any exceptions to a country behaving as China is. But ultimately I do actually agree with you, because the genius, the great value really of Queen Elizabeth II was her ability to execute soft power in a way that no other leader on the planet has been able to do. And I think that if this is a way to try and get a channel of listening and of affection between China and London, then it's probably a good idea. But there's other controversies too, because King Juan Carlos of Spain, who abdicated in 2014, he will be coming out of self-inflicted exile in the Middle East to attend the funeral.
Oh, has he been invited?
Yes, and you know, he probably related to our royals. He certainly was a friend of the Queen.
I thought his son was in charge in Spain now, as it were.
But Juan Carlos is coming to the funeral. And
but he's always been a member of the family, hasn't he? The wider family.
I understand so, but the problem here is that he is facing allegations from his ex-lover, the Daily Mail uses the word, that could mean he should be standing trial in London, but he's going to be allowed to come in and leave for this funeral.
Honestly, you know, wedding invitation lists are complicated enough, but this one is a nightmare, I can imagine, for the diplomats and the courtiers.
And just quickly, even North Korea has been invited.
But they're not coming.
Well, I'm not sure whether they're coming, but Kim Jong-un said he won't be attending because it was an invite at ambassador level, but you may see the North Korean ambassador among the ranks at Westminster Abbey.
Interesting.
I think it's the point about soft power is very important, because we're in this sort of unique moment in which, on the one hand, a sort of discussions about the future of the monarchy in the context of a funeral, and, you know, at a human level, a woman dying is probably, a lot of people find it insensitive and distasteful. But on the other hand, the thing that also happens is that we have a new monarch, and that is, you know, with the right kind of timing, I think, a good opportunity to talk about the nature of the fact that even a funeral like this poses huge political questions. I mean, the thing about China and Russia is, I think Stephen is right, particularly at this very moment, you don't want to be seen as leaving China out in the cold because of the way in which Russia has tried to have links with China in relation to the war in Ukraine. So even though we see the ceremony and the tradition as being very sort of removed from politics, and we see the images of people going and paying their respects as something above politics, actually everything is political. And within the right time, I think Republicans like me will start to have to start asking some questions about the way in which democracy works in this country, particularly under a new monarch like Charles. But the just sort of putting all of that to one side and looking at the sort of human level, there is this story in The Guardian which is about, which asks the question of why we express national grief on this level and what's happening when you see so many people queuing for hours and hours and miles, whether or not this is simply about one woman, the Queen, or whether there's something kind of more broader going on. And
like what? Such as?
Well, so the interesting thing that The Guardian points out is that when Diana died, which was obviously very different circumstances, there was a Gallup poll that was done at the time, and it showed that half the people said that it was like a personal friend had died, and actually quite significant numbers, 28% of people said that they were experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. And there was this sort of change in the way in which grief was expressed, and Diana became known as the People's Princess, very much a fan of public emoting in that kind of a way. And researchers at the University of St Andrews want to do a similar thing here with the Queen, because The Guardian writes that there's a sort of not just a mourning period for an individual, but also a process of the creating of a sense of nationhood here, and actually looking at the sort of intricacies of how we express grief, which is, to make a kind of clumsy comparison, you know how you watch a film or you read a book and you cry, and you're not necessarily crying for the character or the story, you're crying for something within your own life, maybe someone who's died. And lots of the mourners that you've been showing this morning and interviewing have said that, they talk about their own parents, they talk about that particular generation that the Queen represented. And so it's just a kind of interesting thing to reflect on, which is that the sort of national period of grief, although, and I'll talk about this later, it tips over into sort of slightly absurd with closures and censorship, that actually the way in which people are experiencing this is sort of multifaceted.
It's interesting you say that about the passing of a generation. I think that's there too. A lot of people have talked about how she was the last, certainly living monarch to have ever served in World War II, for instance. And you do get the sense from what people say about losing their own grandmothers and things that we are seeing the passing of a whole generation.
Yeah, I mean, I was interviewing people outside Windsor Castle last Friday, and there was a woman who I ended up comforting for a while because she was sobbing, and it turned out that her mother had died last year, aged 95, so was basically the same age as the Queen. And so this, although she loved the Queen, it felt very personal to her because it was a reminder of her mother's death so recently.